Now, on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app. O'Connor and Company.
It's 6:07. It's O'Connor and Company on a busy Wednesday morning, super busy. In fact, let me give you a rundown of what we got ahead of us. 6:35, Cal Thomas, our weekly conversation. 7:05, Steve Malloy of Junk Science about Trump's speech at the UN. 7:35, Thomas Canavan from the Law Enforcement Museum here in town. At 8:05, Susan Crabtree, Real Clear Politics on the conviction of Trump's would-be assassin, Ryan Ruth. And then at 8:35, Luke Rosiak on a blockbuster story out of Maryland where social services in that state put foster children in harm's way. We'll get into all of that coming up. It's Larry O'Connor with Cassie Smedile this morning. It's always good to have you, Cassie.
Good morning. Thank you for having me back, Larry.
Good morning, and we're here with Sean Kennedy now with presidents of Virginians for Safe Communities to follow up on a story that we were tracking. This had to do with an illegal immigrant who was apprehended and arrested for sexually assaulting a jogger on a bike path in Fairfax, on a trail, again, this was the result, Sean Kennedy, of Fairfax County being a de facto sanctuary jurisdiction where immigration laws in cooperation with ICE are not followed and does not take place. And now we've had a development in this person's arrest and the subsequent trial. What's the latest?
The latest is that he's been determined to be mentally incompetent, that he's crazy and therefore will not face trial or, honestly, consequences for a stranger rape. And the then Herndon police chief noted when they made this arrest last November, this was the first incident of a stranger rape in Herndon that she was aware of in her 12 years as a police chief there. So this is an extremely rare thing for this to happen, and so violent and horrible that, of course, there should be eyes on this all the time. And the fact that he was illegal is terrible. But there's one fact in this thing that I think we need to focus on as much as that he should have been deported.
Yeah.
He was arrested only months earlier and sentenced for indecent exposure at the same place on the same W&OD trail for indecent exposure in front of a woman walking the trail, and was released 4 days before the rape. 4 days.
Thank you for jogging my memory on that. There's that. And also, if I remember right, he had already been accused and apprehended in D.C. and Virginia for assault, for battery, for trespassing, stolen vehicle, weapons violations, drinking and smoking marijuana in public, loitering. And then the latest was the indecent exposure. At no point in all of those run-ins with law enforcement was he, A, determined eligible for deportation, or B, determined to be mentally incompetent. Now suddenly he's mentally incompetent to stand trial. He was competent enough to be released to the public, but he wasn't competent to stand trial.
Exactly. I mean, we're safe to have him on the streets, but we wouldn't want to violate his rights and have him incarcerated. And what's critical here is being deemed incompetent to stand trial doesn't mean what it used to mean. It doesn't mean you go to the loony bin where they put locks on the doors. It means often they put you in outpatient, which means they free you and make you come every week to take your meds, or they check in on you, or you have to go to therapy or whatnot. And that means he could still do what he just did. He proved it in November of last year that when back on the streets, he will commit more violent sex acts.
Gosh, this story crystallizes the worst fears of women, of parents, of communities. When we talk about how illegal immigration has made every town a border town, every community border community, but getting to the heart of what you're talking about, it's not just because they've come into our country illegally. It is because we have a system that is not protecting citizens and is allowing this to happen, essentially. And we talk all the time, of course, about we've got an election coming up in 6 weeks, 41 days, and we've got a woman who's calling herself a moderate running for governor, Abigail Spanberger, who has been on the record of saying that she would roll back the immigration policy. She is in favor of making Virginia a sanctuary state. What is the consequence of that? From your perspective, are we talking about this is not just going to be a one-off instance that we're talking about?
Oh, it definitely won't be. I mean, this is the consequence. In effect, we have been a sanctuary state regardless of Glenn Youngkin being governor, because Joe Biden was president. The 10 to 15 million illegals crossed the border between when he entered office and when he left office. And who those are, we don't know. They didn't do background checks because of the way it works. How do you check backgrounds in a foreign country that has, hamster wheel cages for their national criminal background system in Guatemala, Nicaragua, et cetera? So we have no way to verify what they did in those countries. They come here, they commit new crimes, and Joe Biden continued to allow them to stay here. You know how we know this is a consequence of the national sanctuary policy? At one point in 2022, when he was arrested by the police, he asked to be deported. And yet he's still walking our streets. And 2 years later, he rapes a woman in Herndon, Virginia. It's truly insane.
And these are the policies of Steve Descano and his party that continue to be protected and celebrated by the Democrats. And Sean, what's specifically to this suspect, this person who has now been found to be incompetent? This is Humberto, I believe was his name. What's going to happen with him? Has it been announced whether he will be now handed over to ICE, or will the Democrats of Fairfax County have their policy prevail and keep the sanctuary for him?
Well, I mean, that actually is an interesting question, because if he was to remain in law enforcement custody, ICE can't grab him out of a jail to take him, they can't break down the doors, whatever. It's when he goes onto the street. If the mental competency order from the judge is inpatient, he would remain in jail until he's being transferred to a mental health facility. If it were outpatient and he were back on the streets, ICE can execute it. But we know that neither the Fairfax County Sheriff nor almost any other jurisdiction save Loudoun cooperates with ICE on issuing detainers. They don't know when he would be released. Would he be released at 5 p.m. on Friday? Would he be released at 2 p.m. on Tuesday? Or whenever they actually walk him out the door. Now, I know that there are good people at the sheriff's office and that they sometimes, let it slip casually when he's going to be released. But that is not a formal notification to ICE. That means ICE has to mill around on the word of somebody else and wait for him to come out, or they have to execute the warrant, on the streets itself, which is dangerous for everybody involved. And this person's a transient, so where he's going isn't clear. It's hard to piece together where homeless illegal immigrants gather. So it's very difficult to know whether or not ICE will be able to get him easily and quickly if he's released on the streets.
And quickly, is that merely the decision of the Fairfax County Police Department, or does the DA's office, Commonwealth Attorney's Office, Steve Descano, have any say in this as well in terms of the timing and his disposition?
The sheriff decides when he gets released in terms of time of day or whatever, but the judge is going to order either an outpatient or an inpatient transfer. So that hasn't happened yet. They just deemed him mentally incompetent.
Got it. Thank you for that update. And by the way, that sheds light as to why this doesn't happen in Loudoun County, because you've got a good sheriff out there with Mike Chapman who fully cooperates in, what's the phrase I'm looking for? Enforcing the law. That's it. Thank you, Sean Kennedy. Always good to talk with you.
Thank you.
WMAL, making sense of the news. Live from the Home Paramount Pest Control Studios. Home Paramount, the leader in pest control since 1939.
Traffic and weather brought to you by Hadid Carpet Cleaning.
Thank you very much. Very much appreciated. And I don't mind making this speech without a teleprompter, because the teleprompter is not working. I feel very happy to be up here with you nevertheless. And that way you speak more from the heart. I can only say that whoever's operating this teleprompter is in big trouble.
Now, that's how Trump's speech before the President, Donald J. Trump, thank you very much, speech before the United Nations began yesterday, the General Assembly speeches. And at the time, it was sort of noted as a somewhat amusing moment, as the teleprompter didn't work. Trump handled it with aplomb. And, of course, appropriate comparisons to what would have happened should this have occurred during the Biden presidency. It would have been a complete malfunction and breakdown with smoke coming out of his ears, and he would start, spewing anecdotes of his racist past. But now it appears there may have been more to this than just a quirky fluke of technology. His escalator also stopped working the second he and the First Lady stepped onto it at the United Nations, causing a photo opportunity that appeared to be sort of awkward and strange. And I think the attempt was to humiliate Donald Trump, but he just sort of took it in stride and started walking up the steps, 79-year-old president of the United States. There's now some suggestion that both of these things, the escalator not functioning properly and the teleprompter not functioning right as his speech was about to be given, were actually planned and done deliberately by staff at the UN, Cassie.
Well, I had that same thought. Had this been Joe Biden, he couldn't have walked up the escalator. That would have been a huge issue. So glad we have a healthy president who can just roll with it. But to your point, you see reports about this that's a major security issue. To all of a sudden have the president of the United States paused in this freeze hold zone, they called it, I think. That's an issue. If somebody wanted to do him harm, which we know, just yesterday a man was convicted for trying to assassinate then candidate, now the president of the United States. So these are very real things. And if there was an actual, somebody just thinking, I'm going to pull a prank on this guy because I don't like him.
Yeah.
This is a very serious situation that does need to be investigated.
We will speak with Susan Crabtree of Real Clear Politics about both of those issues, about whether this could have been deliberate and whether the Secret Service is trying to track that down, and also about the conviction of Trump's would-be assassin, Ryan Ruth. The Sunday Times in London actually had in their article about the speech this little paragraph, quoting now, and this was Sunday, the 2 days before the speech. To mark Trump's arrival, UN staff members have joked that they may turn off the escalators and elevators and simply tell him they ran out of money, so he has to walk up the stairs. And, of course, that's exactly what happened. Caroline Leavitt, the press secretary for the White House, said if someone at the UN intentionally stopped the escalator as the president and first lady were stepping on, they need to be fired and investigated immediately. Maybe it was a prank. Maybe it was just a fluke of technology, but it seemed eerily coincidental that both of those things happened. Also, Katie Pavlich, who was reporting for Town Hall in the room, she was in the General Assembly during the speech. She said, based on her firsthand report, that the volume on President Trump's speech was considerably lower in the room than it had been for other world leaders.
Yeah, thank goodness we have a good free press, and Katie Pavlich was actually debunking a lot of people who were out there saying, Trump wasn't getting applause, even Melania wasn't applauding, and then she said you could not hear in the room. So context is key. But again, why was that the case? And by the way, President Trump still schooled everyone in the room, still embarrassed 75% of the nations for being feckless on Israel and other things. So I think he still won the day.
Yeah, I think you're right. And it was something really amazing to see a president actually confront the UN about its very existence. The U.S., of course, was incredibly instrumental in creating the UN, but it was 80 years ago, coming out of World War II. A lot of people say, the UN is ineffective now because Russia and China have permanent seats on the Security Council, which, of course, the response should be, okay, well, then maybe we need to rethink this body, because it was created in literally a different world. Okay, it's not literally, but a different world environment. It is the same planet, but a very different environment here coming out of World War II. It was before Mao takeover in China. It was during the Soviet Union, which doesn't exist anymore. Why did Russia inherit the Soviet Union seat on the Security Council? Soviet Union is defunct now. Is it right that it just automatically went to Russia? Here's President Trump speaking directly to the General Assembly and laying out exactly why many Americans feel that the UN perhaps needs to be reimagined.
I didn't think of it at the time because I was too busy working to save millions of lives. That is the saving and stopping of these wars. But later I realized that the United Nations wasn't there for us. They weren't there. I thought of it really after the fact, not during these negotiations, which were not easy. That being the case, what is the purpose of the United Nations? The UN has such tremendous potential. I've always said it. It has such tremendous, tremendous potential. but it's not even coming close to living up to that potential.
Yeah, and he went on a litany of all of the peace agreements that he's been able to work through this term and also in the last term with the Abraham Accords and others. And he said, and you guys were nowhere. You didn't have anything to do with it. So why do we even need you at this point? And given the fact that they keep putting Iran on the Human Rights Commission at the UN, I got to say the president made a pretty strong point.
Absolutely. It's a joke there, too. But while he's trying to arrange peace through, as you rightly point out, the Abraham Accords, they're running cover for Iran. And I loved his quip about how he said, I did put in to renovate this place, and I would have come in at a quarter of the cost and would have given you nicer materials. And instead, which just underscores the boondoggle that is the UN, that they went with somebody else and ended up being overrun and laid in plastic instead of marble. I thought that was a perfectly Trump way of encapsulating the issues with the UN.
It was. Listen, he also went straight at their climate change agenda and how anti-free market it is, anti-prosperity it is, pro-corruption it is. At 7:05, we'll speak to Steve Malloy from junkscience.com about that. It's 6:23. Coming up, we'll talk to Cal Thomas, find out what he thought of Jimmy Kimmel's return yesterday. And, boy, about the real censorship story we learned of yesterday on behalf of the Biden administration. We'll talk about that, too, coming up.
WMAL-FM, Woodbridge, Washington, a Cumulus media station. Making sense of the news. News Talk 105.9. News now. Now on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app. O'Connor and Company.
6:37. It's O'Connor and Company. Thanks for tuning in on a busy Wednesday morning. Coming up at 7:05, Steve Malloy of Junk Science. 7:35, Thomas Canavan of the Law Enforcement Museum. Talk about Police Weekend. 8:05, Susan Crabtree, Real Clear Politics on the conviction of Trump's would-be assassin. And then at 8:35, Luke Rosiak, Daily Wire. It's Larry O'Connor with Cassie Smedile. Thanks for helping me through this morning, Cassie.
Good morning, Larry. Good to be with you.
And I definitely need your help because we got a handful here. It's Cal Thomas. Oh, man, you know how Cal can be. Good morning, Cal.
Good morning, they and them. I understand that those terms are being introduced by Winsome Sears in the governor's race, going after the transgender vote. I didn't know there were that many in Virginia, but,
So, see, Abigail Spanberger seems to have locked it up. Hey, Cal, all the histrionics over Jimmy Kimmel and his return last night, but the hidden story here that not a lot of people are talking about is that, sure, ABC put the show back on, but people in major cities across the country didn't actually see it.
Right. It's the old, if a tree falls in the woods and nobody's there, did it really fall in the woods? Who cares? I mean, Robert De Niro cares, and the Hollywood left. But as I wrote in my column yesterday, there's no constitutional right to your own show. I was on Fox for a number of years, and when they decided not to renew my contract, I didn't complain. There were no demonstrators outside demanding I be returned.
I was there.
Thank you very much. You were the guy arrested by the police. Anyway, I told him I'd dye my hair blonde, but I wasn't having the surgery, but it didn't matter.
And listen, by the way, Kimmel's show was failing already. The fact that the two major syndicators, Sinclair and Nexstar, the broadcast owners, I should say, decided not to carry it. What do you think really was at play here? I thought, by the way, that it was the FCC and Donald Trump and their authoritarian, jackbooted Hitler-like tactics that forced Kimmel off the air. So, how was he even allowed back on with that fascist in the White House?
Well, it's all because they're trying to cater to their left-wing base, which is continually shrinking. Stephen Colbert must be wringing his hands and saying, "Why him and not me?"
Yeah, right.
Ratings, and look, it's a business before it's anything else. If you can't sell time to advertisers, if you can't make money, and he was losing money, and so was Colbert, and he had a huge staff, Kimmel does, and probably still does, these people still don't get it. They still think flyover country is a place they only visit every 4 years when they have to during primary elections. I mean, they just don't get it. They don't know anybody. I guarantee you, they don't know anybody who is a conservative, who goes to church, who is patriotic. They can't identify with the Charlie Cook memorial service in that huge stadium. They think they're just strange people. And as long as you do that, you're going to continue to fail. And Jimmy Kimmel's show is a failure, as is Colbert's. They have abysmal ratings, maybe 3 million tops. Greg Gutfeld has more than that on Fox News.
Yeah, and listen, I'm always in favor of more voices rather than fewer voices, and it bothers me when corporations get involved in content. But at the same time, listen, Jimmy Kimmel plays in ABC's sandbox. If ABC decides that they don't want him in the sandbox, they own the sandbox. It's their right to do that.
Here's the problem, and this is why the left is so upset. They are losing their monopoly on the three major pillars of this country. Reagan used to talk about it, too. Academia, news, and entertainment. The conservatives and religious people have been challenging those three things, and now with Charlie Kirk, they finally see a crack in the academic wall. And if they lose younger people, and by the way, new surveys just out today show that younger people are signing up as Republicans, this is why they're so angry. They've had the territory all to themselves for decades, and now it's slipping away.
Interesting. Real fast, did you catch Trump's speech at the UN yesterday, and do you think they shut down the escalator on purpose?
This is great. He came down the golden escalator to first announce his candidacy. Now he can't get up the golden escalator at the UN. Look, I thought the first 15, 20 minutes was all about himself, use of the personal pronoun. But then he got into attacking the UN for being feckless, worthless, and incompetent. And I think he was absolutely right on that. And then later he says, this is amazing, that Ukraine can win the war and gain back all the territory it's lost if NATO steps up and does more with the weapons we're going to sell them. That was pretty amazing.
Yeah, he seems to have done a full 180 on the Ukraine-Russia thing. And do you think that's just, I think he approached this thinking, all right, listen, I can write it. Biden, there was no chance that Putin would work with him because Biden had been, pounding the table and doing his own, Khrushchev impersonation with his shoe. Maybe I can come in and make nice and get something going. But it seems like he's tried it and he's reached the understanding that you can't work with Putin.
Yeah, well, we'll see. I mean, the Russian economy is in terrible shape. The soldiers are taking people out of prisons now and putting them on the front lines. They have no experience in fighting, and if they survive, they'll probably go back to criminality. So, Trump is not a diplomat, but he's keeping everybody confused, which in some ways is a good thing.
Yeah, that's one big difference with Putin. Putin lets out the prisoners and puts them in a uniform and puts them in the war. Newsom just lets out the prisoners and lets them go to the beach or get a liberal arts degree at UC San Diego.
Larry, this is why you earn the big dollars. You really are smart.
See, and this is why I protested in front of Fox when they took the yacht. And you're right, I did get arrested because I was nude.
Well, I was going to say, I thought it was because of exposure, but anyway.
You were right. You're always right with that. Thank you, Cal. It is 6:43.
Mark Levin, weekdays 6 till 9 on 105.9 WMAL, making sense of the news.
It's September 24th. It's 6:48. It's O'Connor Company with Larry and Cassie Smedile. And we love our Cal Thomas conversations. Let's get you up to date on some news yesterday out of Florida, where the would-be assassin of Donald Trump, the man who set himself up there on the golf course and was able to skirt right up to the Secret Service perimeter there and line up for a kill shot on President Trump during the campaign, Ryan Ruth, until he was discovered and apprehended. Ryan Ruth was found guilty yesterday of a federal jury of trying to assassinate President Trump. It didn't get a whole lot of attention yesterday, of course, because the more important story was Jimmy Kimmel, I suppose. But it still astounds me that it's sort of disappeared from the conversation that Donald Trump had to deal with two assassination attempts, one, of course, in Butler, that ended up with a bullet whizzing past his head, mere centimeters from killing him. And that assassin, by the way, Mr. Crooks, we know nothing about. There's been no deep dive into who this person was and how that occurred. and now Ryan Ruth. And then add to that the Charlie Kirk story, which, of course, the media is trying to disappear from the headlines because Kimmel is the real victim in all of this. It's just astounding how broken our media is in covering these stories. But Ryan Ruth, 59 years old, has now been convicted of attempting to assassinate Donald Trump, and it appears as though he will never see the light of day again.
Yeah, it was a wild scene during the verdict, but also this entire trial. But I did hear someone say that President Trump could be given the ability to, or could take up his opportunity to give a victim impact statement. And to your point, Larry, at first I thought, well, I don't know that he'll do that. It was very clearly open and closed case. But for the point of saying this is a really big deal and forcing people to take note of it, because I think you're right, especially in light of Charlie Kirk. People are uneasy about what is happening in our country, the root causes of why this is happening, which nobody wants to talk about, of course. And yes, that Jimmy Kimmel is getting more oxygen than he's ever gotten just on his own steam of his own late night show. This is the best thing that has ever happened to Jimmy Kimmel. But I think you're right. This is should be a much bigger story.
By the way, you're right to describe the scene in the courtroom at the moment of the verdict, a wild scene. Here's how Fox News reported it.
It's quite shocking. As the verdict was read, it appeared to our producers inside the courtroom that Ruth tried to stab himself in the neck with a pen. That's what it appeared to look like. Then 4 marshals dragged him out of the courtroom, took his coat off. They then shackled him at the waist and ankles, and then they brought him back into the courtroom. So again, this just in from our producers. As the verdict was being read, Ruth tried to hurt himself in the neck with a pen.
I hesitate. I please caution anybody from saying, well, he was clearly crazy. He's crazy. Too often we diminish people who have evil intentions and are motivated by evil and have warped morality and warped understanding of what is righteous and what is wrong. Too often, because it is hard for us normies to comprehend such behavior, that we just, they must be crazy. They must be sick in the head. They must be mentally disturbed. Sometimes people are just evil. Sometimes people have been influenced by other evil people, and they do these things, and it makes perfectly sane and rational sense to them. So he's not crazy. He's just a bad person.
Just a bad person. And I think there was a reporter, because his daughter is kind of the only one trying to defend her dad and saying he's a kind man. And the reporter said, well, I think someone trying to assassinate the candidate and now president of the United States would not be perceived as kind. And when I heard the report about him trying to stab himself, I thought maybe that is a last-ditch effort to make us think he's crazy because to exactly your point, I think he knew exactly what he was doing. Radicalized, okay, but sound mind also.
Right. I mean, how is it that you can be so crazy and be so, unfit and not have a sound mind and yet still put together a plot like this? It doesn't square. It is 6:52.